Diana and Kenton with us today to present practical approaches for supporting hope and healing for male survivors. So thank you both for being with us. I'm going to share really quickly, if you'll allow me to talk a little bit about you guys and to share your bios with folks here. So let me pull that up here and see if I can manage multiple screens. I'm going to do my best. So if you will with me, I will do my best. Here we go. All right. Let's see here. Look at that picture.
That's awesome.
That was before the hair and the beard.
Hair and the beard. Well, I mean, for the good folks who are here, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, this is straight from MenHealing's website. So I just copied it from there, Kenton. So I can't, you look different, man.
Very nostalgic. Oh man, look at that.
I love it. The young man, Kenton. Kenton is amazing. He's and I hope I'm right still with your information, a licensed social worker, just an amazing friend and colleague who I was very fortunate to work with and to spend time with and to get to know through my work, which I'm no longer on the board of MenHealing for the sake of transparency, which I miss all of you at MenHealing. They're doing some amazing work. Thank you. And so they're really wonderful people, and I'm so glad that you could be with us, Kenton, today. You have 20 years of experience, probably plus, man, with that beard. 20 plus experience of working in child welfare systems, New York. And it's such a comprehensive bio. If you go to MenHealing's website about us, there's information about Diana and Kenton there that you can read. It's just such a phenomenal history and work experience. Forensic social worker throughout New York court system, a lecturer, has extensive experience providing individual group therapy, and that's why you are here. We are thrilled to have you today to talk about how clinicians, how therapists, how advocates can better support male survivors, and working with folks with complex mental health issues, sex offenders, parenting, drug treatment programs. Again, this is just a drop in the bucket of Ken's professional experience. So thank you, Ken, for being with us this afternoon. Now I get to talk about Diana. This is so great. Look at that beautiful picture. I loved it too. I was just like, Diana is a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I don't know if that's still true today, but you are one of my favorite feminists, and you are one of my favorite women folk, and I just adore you. And multicultural therapy at the University of Utah, worked at rape recovery centers. So a fellow advocate, someone who's worked at rape crisis centers. That's one of the things I love and admire about you, including 6 years as a clinical director, facilitated workshops on trauma response, shame resilience, listening skills, mindfulness, and self-care. So just both of you are absolutely amazing people. You're lovely humans, and we are thrilled to have you today. Thank you both. And I'm sure there's so much more about you that you could share about yourself, and feel free to do that. But we are happy to have you. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Definitely want to encourage people to take care of themselves, to remember that we are still talking about male-identified survivors of sexual violence. And so I want to encourage you to take care of yourself at any point. If you need any support, reach out to our staff in the chat room, reach out to Tanya if you want to talk one-on-one with her. And then, of course, I hope all of you will join us if you feel like you need some additional emotional support or just want to chat with other people, with other survivors who have been in this space all day, to join us for today's debrief after today's session. So Diana and Kenton, thank you so much for being with us, and we're happy to have you.
Thanks, Emiliano.
So good afternoon, everyone. I will, before we jump into anything, before our introductions or anything, MenHealing, we like to start every space with a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to read it out loud, and then we'll get started. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations and ancestors who contributed to their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some of our ancestors were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to come here from their distant homes, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all lines of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. Each of us who are here today, no matter where we are physically, are standing on the ancestral lands of an indigenous people who were here before us. We pause to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that precede our being together here today. Please take a moment to reflect on the Native communities that inhabited the land that you occupy now. We pay respects to their elders, and we take a moment now to acknowledge their past, present, and future care of the land and all the manifestations of the earth spirits. May we all join together in stewardship of this precious earth. Thank you. So, all right, Diane and I are going to talk to you all a little bit about our org MenHealing. We're going to go back and forth between some of the slides and then just a kind of casual conversation about some of the work that we do here. As Emiliano said, my name is Kenton Kirby. I've been on the team for a number of years. But before we get into your intros, Diana, I want to ask you a question to kind of do a little intro. He did our bios, but my question to you is, who are you? And why MenHealing? And then I'll answer after you.
Okay, so wow, hard to know where to start. I met Jim Struby, who we'll be talking more about during this presentation. He's our executive director. He lived in Salt Lake City, which is where I live, for many years. And when I went back to school in my 40s to get my counseling degree, I was doing an internship at the Women's Resource Center on campus. And Jim had just moved to Salt Lake and came to our resource center and gave a presentation on working with male survivors, because that's been his field for his entire career, basically. Anyway, so then when I ended up at the Rape Recovery Center, we didn't have any services for men at that time, and eventually contracted with Jim to come and do the first male survivor group at our Rape Recovery Center here in Salt Lake City. So for me personally, since I'd been very more involved in women's issues up until then, it was a real learning experience. And I was able to do the interviews for Jim's group members. And that was the beginning of kind of my heart connection with men who have to be very brave to enter the world of rape recovery centers in order to get a group. And I just loved it and have loved working. I've been working with MenHealing now for about 6 years on the facilitator team. It's been a great experience. But my years at Rape Recovery were so meaningful to me, and I just admire all of you that are doing this work. And so glad that you're here to talk to us.
And yeah, who am I? I'm a New York social worker, very proud New Yorker, Brooklyn, New York resident. And why MenHealing for me? I've worked, a lot of my commitment to this work has been really specifically for me, it was on young men with impacted by community violence. And in my work, working with survivors of sexual assault, was always really on the other side, working with men who had caused harm. And solely just like that was the lens that I was doing the work in, while also working with my young folks who were actively involved in gun violence on either side of the work. But why MenHealing? I was at a convening with Sharon, who's on the Zoom here from BARC, and we got to get connected with one another, and then I met with Jim over a phone call, and she said, "Hey, do you want to be a part of this group that do these weekends of recovery?" And I'm like, what in the world is a weekend of recovery? Had a conversation with Jim, and if anyone of y'all have ever met Jim, he is someone that is someone that you gravitate to, and it's hard to say no to him. And gotta be honest, since I've been on the team for about 5 years, it's probably some of my most impactful work that I do. I love the weekends. They're not just transformative for the male identified survivors that come to the weekends, but also for myself as a practitioner, as a facilitator. So that's what brings me here, my commitment to the Men Healing team, the connection I have with folks on the team, and the work that we're doing, and we get to see this magical, like this magic happen on these weekends. And it's also really exciting with some of the additional work that we're starting to do when it comes to our own expansion. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, a lot about that down the line. But I just want to kind of let y'all know who we were. And I would love it if folks kind of introduce themselves in the chat as we go through here. I'd love to see who's here. Oh, someone said that, yes, of course I'm from Brooklyn. Someone said, I said y'all. Am I sure? Yes, I am from Brooklyn. I push original. All right. So the goals for today, right, our conversation with you all. We're going to talk about the history of Men Healing, what got us here, how we started. We're going to talk a lot about what is a weekend recovery, the different types of weekends of recovery and days of recovery. Going to share a little bit about the considerations, like what do we do leading up to a weekend, during the weekends, and after the weekends to make sure to keep engagement with our alumni of men who attend our weekends. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we reframe trauma in our with a video that we have on our website. I encourage you all to go check out our website. And I also want to talk about we'll kind of wrap up kind of talking about some of our movement building efforts beyond just our weekends and days of recovery, and how we're trying to do more work outside of just those weekends. And Diana can talk to our support groups. We have one-off projects in South Africa and other places. So we'll talk a little more about those things too. But once again, I encourage you all to come check out our website, menhealing.org. So, and if at any point, please feel free to jump in. Diana, do you want to start with the history?
Sure.
Or you want...
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I noticed at the end of Emiliano's presentation, he had the logos for malesurvivor.org, for Men Healing, and also for 1 in 6. So it was in the 1970s that a group of therapists, including Jim, started working on this whole issue of men getting some help for healing. And eventually they created malesurvivor.org, and then the Weekends of Recovery started in 2001. Then in 2017, the two organizations kind of separated apart. The weekends came with Men Healing, and some of the other online work that Male Survivor does stayed with Male Survivor. There's certainly still a lot of collegial respect on both sides of those organizations. So as Men Healing, I think our next slide is our values. Is that right? Don't go there yet. I just want to make sure it's there because I'll come back to that. But we did have our 100th event for men just last month in August. And we also had the 101st one just last week. And so we have over now 2,000 alumni who have attended Men Healing events. So can I look at the values?
Yeah, no problem.
Is that the next one? Yeah, I just want to really emphasize that I think these values are one of the reasons for the strength of our organization. From the beginning, there's just been this kind of cohesive agreement that we want to come from these places, that we want to be transparent, that we want to behave with integrity, not only when we're working with the men, but when we're working with each other, and that we're working on relationships again with each other as well as with the people that we're working with. And then that self-care is important. Jim has always really stressed that we need to take care of ourselves, and that if somebody feels they need a break or feels they need X, Y, and Z, that is something they're able to express and get support for. And then all of that, the roots of the tree is intentionality, like coming together for the purpose that the organization exists. Healing for male and male identified survivors. Yeah.
It took a long time to get to this place. A lot of interrogation as an org, as a team, to
Mhm.
on these different these core values. Which one thing I enjoy about MenHealing is that we're really intentional, and actually it is the root of our work. Um, these interrogations of the different why is it important to build on relationships? Everyone knows why, but we want to name why it's important to build those relationships. So much of our work, from our weekends to even post weekend work with our alum, it's all about relationship building and building that community, right? We really move in integrity in a lot of our work, and also in all of our work. We don't call each other out; we call each other in, as a way to build and kind of keep this work going along in a way that when we're in front of the male survivors that we are fortunate enough to work with, we can say we truly live in these values.
Right. I think it's so important that the team, whatever team is doing the weekend, are just by how they relate with each other, demonstrating to the participants a healthy way to have relationships.
Exactly. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, and I want to talk a little bit. Hold on, I'm moving a lot of stuff around on my computer, so bear with me. Uh, but yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what a weekend looks like. Um, so for those who have never been on a weekend, have never even heard of what we do here at MenHealing, um, essentially a weekend recovery. We start out, it's a 3-day retreat, about 2.5 days, right, Diana? Two,
Mhm. Friday midday till Sunday afternoon. Yeah.
yeah. That's for, we have 2 levels. We have a level 1, and then we have advanced weekends. And for anyone to be in an advanced weekend, they have to go through a level 1. And so the level 1 weekend, before the weekend, we actually interview every attendee. We do a thorough interview, learning a little bit about their history, what made them want to attend a weekend right now at this point in their healing journey, what they want to get out of it. Um, any you want to learn about your identities and like what's important to you for that space, and we really prioritize like what is going to keep you safe enough in this space, right?
Mhm.
So we do all that work, and then
Right. I just wanted to add that we also do screening about perpetration, if there's a perpetration history for any of the men, and if that has or has not been expunged, if it was during, usually they'll have to do a second interview to make sure that, again, keeping everyone safe, that we don't accept people who are going to act out in any way.
and we're trying out, and one thing, so after we go through all of those interviews, um the weekend starts on the Friday at like noon. Level 1 start at like in the afternoon, like 12 o'clock. We start with, and throughout the weekend we have large groups and small groups. And the large groups are more about psychoed, learning a little bit about how trauma lives in the body and like basic trauma reactions, um,
Self-compassion, mindfulness, yeah.
um, tapping into joy, right? Building community with one another. So a lot of the larger sessions are kind of focused on that. And then we have small groups, and the small groups are a little more intimate. They're available, a little more spaces where we can talk about what's been happening on the weekend, the themes, but also a little deeper dive, more personal. And then another great part of the weekends is we have these breaks throughout the day, and the retreat sites that we're at are beautiful. And one of the other reasons things we say about the weekends is there's magic, and even just the locations that we're at, where the male survivors can connect with one another, build their relationships, learn, break the isolation. Because a lot of times, I know in our interviews and our work with survivors, there's a lot of talk about feeling isolated, feeling alone in their journey, and feeling like they can't share this. But we want to create those organic opportunities for them to connect with one another through our like kind of creating the handle for them to do the work. And then at the end of the weekend, we have art projects that folks men do during the weekend. We go on hikes. We start every hike morning with a hike. So really taking advantage of the locations that we're at, opportunities to build organically and with the breaks, and with between the big large sessions and the small breakout sessions. It's a robust weekend for folks. Am I missing anything else about the weekend, Diana?
Well, and one of the goals of the weekends is to encourage the men to make connections that they can continue with after the weekend is over. And so that last Sunday morning is always devoted to making sure that they can, especially the small groups, but sometimes the whole group, really want to. I mean, we have small groups that years later are still meeting on Zoom or meeting in person. And I just feel like that sense of isolation can just be so reduced. That's one of the reasons we started the support groups as well, which we'll talk about. But really wanting, I think over the years, I've heard Jim talk about this many times, and it's true that the facilitator team has learned to step back and really create an environment where the men can connect with each other. Like, we're not trying to create a dependency on us. We're not replacing their therapists. In fact, we always ask if they're in therapy and encourage them to be in therapy. But we want them to not feel so alone and to be able to connect with each other rather than us.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful experience while being a part of it. I always feel honored by it. And the locations we've done these retreats over the years, these events, have been Alta Lodge out in Salt Lake City, Utah, outside of Salt Lake City. But actually this week was our last weekend at Alta after 20 years, right?
You know, it's so funny because yes, we decided prices are pricing us out and that kind of thing. But I understand from the team that was there this week that Alta had such a good experience with our team this week that they're reconsidering that. So we're kind of got our fingers crossed again, because it's such a beautiful place to have the weekends.
And so that's really great, because I was actually at the one in August. And
Yeah.
I would even say we also have we do weekends out in Hope Springs out in Ohio, another beautiful place. And then we've done some weekends up in Whidbey Island, Washington State. And those have been some of the places that we've like kind of had longer standing relationships with. But we've done weekends events out in I believe in Ontario. We've done New York. And so our weekends, we're always open to do them anywhere else that we can if we find the right spaces. So we're always looking to expand our reach.
Yeah, if you know any places, let us know, because we're pretty particular just in terms of it can't be too expensive, but we really want to have great food. I think that the great food at our weekends has always been a real plus. And yeah, so there needs to be places that would be supportive of what we're doing. They're just more personal places, I think.
It's important to be aligned with the settings that we do the work in, because what we're doing is so important. And the folks, the men who attend, we want to make sure that we're creating as safe enough of a space as we can, and having a close relationship and alignment with the sites is really key for us. So I mentioned to you all, we do think about, we consider a lot of those little nuanced details when it comes to our events and who we partner with as an org. So I just want to kind of like lift that up. So I talked a little bit about our level ones. Any questions, thoughts, comments, reactions to our level one? Then I'll talk a little about our advanced. We'll talk a little about our advanced weekends. Anything in the chat coming up?
Nothing in the chat yet.
All right.
Definitely, folks, want to encourage you to drop anything in the chat. Yeah. Is there a place? I'm curious, Diana and Kenton, I'm trying to point people to your website, but is there a place on the website where you can learn more about the weekends of recovery? If folks want to learn more, if there are male survivors in the audience, or if there are folks who are working with a male survivor that want to encourage them to attend.
Definitely, and not only to attend, but to go to that website. It's a very rich resource for people. There's lots of explanations as well as videos from survivors and information on the things we're doing other than the weekends, which we'll talk more about later. It's a great website.
And I just put the website in the chat for anyone. So if you all want to check it out, go right to it. That's totally fine. I encourage you.
MenHealing.org.
You're faster than me, Kenton. I was like, for it. And of course, for folks that attended the last session I shared, and in the chat you'll see it, but it's a link to a resource that includes information about MenHealing. So you'll have access to their website and to other resources that are available to male survivors, as well as other folks who are working with who are providing services to male survivors. But I was curious, and I don't know if you'll talk about this, but how do you create that sort of safety for male survivors that are participating in the retreat? Like, what are the things how do you communicate that? Like, how do you create that space? How do you ensure that they, that they feel safe, that they feel comfortable to participate or to even register in the first place, right? So we're kind of curious, especially for folks who are trying to organize something similar in their own community or provide that kind of therapy or support. How do you create that?
I think it starts with the interview process. Like any interaction they have with the organization, even before a weekend, we want to make sure that we're responding respectfully and, representing those values that we talked about in every interaction that we have. So I think it can be really helpful. The facilitators who are going to be at a specific weekend are usually the same people who interview the participants so that they have a connection with someone who will be there. So I think that's the first step.
And then the second step would be actually at the weekend, before we even jump into, one of the first things we do is we have a conversation, we have an exercise around safety. And it's almost like we're contracting with one another, and the men who come to the weekend are able to contribute what do they need in a moment for this weekend to feel safe, to feel heard. And so it's not just us coming up with these are the things you all need to do, as opposed to we're all actively involved in it, and they're making the contract. So we hold to that contract that they create, and we actually write it down on the wall. Well, not on the wall, like on poster board. We wouldn't have relationships with these sites.
Right.
But so that's our agreements that we hold to for the weekend. And once again, Diane, I've always had Jim and other folks on the team refer to our roles on the weekend as like, we're holding the container.
We're holding the space. Yeah.
So we're kind of on the outside, and once in a while we dive in, but then we do whatever we're going to do, like whether it's the large group setting, large group exercise, and we step back and let the attendees kind of curate, and it's almost like we're dropping gems in there, and they are getting from what they need out of it.
Exactly. I think that's really key, because they are hearing each other say what they need, and it's not just coming from us. And so there's a lot of respect that gets built right there, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because I think for folks that are in the room, who are trying to figure out how to do support groups with male survivors. Well, the retreat is not a support group. I mean, it's much more intensive. It's a completely different model of providing therapeutic support, right? But I think, are there things that I think are applicable in terms of that process of creating safety for for the folks in the room who are wanting to provide therapy one-on-one with male survivors, or facilitate support groups with male survivors? Like, is that, would you encourage folks to consider creating that safe space, right? That bowl, that sense of safety, those agreements, those kinds of things, and both individual and group therapy?
I think it's imperative. I think it's imperative, again, from any interaction. I know when we started our group at the Rape Recovery Center, like I said, it was intimidating for men to come into a space that they had always seen as a women's space. And so our entire staff, not just the people doing the group both ways. You know, we want them to feel like they can trust us, but also we want to trust their process. We don't want to direct their process. So yeah.
And I think it's about like that trust of the support and what we're bringing, that block that many folks tend to have. I think it's connected also how, you know, the stigma of mental health, right? We talk about disorders. Someone's not right, and Diana's making a face because you know exactly what I'm doing, right?
I know, and I'm so glad that you're doing it.
Yeah. So one of the things we've done at MenHealing is we're really starting to talk about how do we reframe trauma from not of the space of you're messed up, you're wrong, you're not right, to something else. So we have a video that I'm going to share. It's called Reframing Trauma, and it's just an offering for folks to just kind of consider another way of looking at something. All right, hold on one second. Let me see. I'm gonna share my screen again, and I think I got the sound right. So let's see. Everyone can see my screen, right? Can you hear?
Today, we know that 1 in every 4 females will experience sexual
Where's the video?
victimization during their lifetime.
You can hear?
I can hear it, but I can't see it. I don't, maybe everybody else can.
I can't see it on my end, but you might need to reload it. But
Let's do it again. Hold on.
it happened to me. It happened to me, Kenton, early. So you know,
Right.
go with it, man. It's all good.
Oh, it's all good. I got it. Exit full screen. Can y'all see it?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Now let's see. Can you see it still?
Yes.
All right. Now, if you can hear it, give me a thumbs up.
Today, we know that 1 in every 4 females will experience sexual victimization during their lifetime. However, most people still do not realize that 1 in every 6 males will also experience sexual victimization during their lifetime.
I was just a boy, and I just thought they loved me.
I couldn't find anyone to help me. I didn't know any adult male could be raped.
Nobody ever asked me if anything was wrong.
I didn't know who to tell. I couldn't find anyone to help me.
Often, it can be 20 years before many males are able to talk about their sexual
And
victimization.
it's not moving.
I thought I could fix it myself.
It's not moving?
No, it's just been on that same picture, even as the sound goes.
All right. Well, I was trying to share the video, but you know what I'll put it in the chat. So
Yes.
check it out.
That's a good thing you're right there,
So long
Gavin.
ago.
This is
I had the same issue earlier, and I don't know what it is, but yes, thank you so much. I was going to ask if you could share the link so that folks can watch it on their own time, but if you want to give a synopsis of the video, that'd be great. And just like
Tim just put in there for us so everyone can check it out when they get a
Yeah.
chance. Thank you, Timothy. Appreciate you. You know, teamwork makes it work.
that's
So,
right.
so basically, in short, what that video was is just kind of reframing this notion of post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress injury. It's easier to come back from an injury as opposed to a disorder. There's so many undercurrents that go with the term disorder, right? As opposed to an injury. I blew my knee out. I've tore my ACL in my younger, slimmer days when I was a college athlete 5 times. Had 5 ACL surgeries, and my knee's not the same. So it's not an ACL disorder. It's an ACL injury. Just like something happened to somebody, it's not a disorder. It's an injury. So it's something about that shifting that could help. That reframing is really helpful for me. I know as a practitioner to like give space for the journey a little, at least on my end. That reframing is really has been really helpful for me. And I hope when you all get a chance to check that video out, you should you'll hopefully it resonates with you all.
Yeah, it's very pathologizing, that diagnosis, to call it a disorder. Yeah, that's a great example of your knee.
Yeah.
In addition to that video, because I'm curious, and I've heard MenHealing talk about this before in terms of their trainings. Has there been some research, or is there like something else out there that folks can read or learn more about reframing around that concept of injury rather than PTSD? Because again, for so many of us, for folks who are clinicians or advocates, or that the language of PTSD is sort of like seared into our training and our as clinicians and social workers, et cetera, right? Like that, how do you reframe that language, right? How do you start moving away from that to really talking about injury? I was just curious.
We might have to write the book. I don't know. I mean, I know we're not the only people who have ever thought of it. And I like what Art just put in the chat about post-traumatic growth. I like that too. I mean, there's words you can use that don't suggest that somebody has a disorder based on something that happened to them. So I don't know if any of you know of any books that speak to the non-pathologizing need to work with PTSD. Let me know. Let us all know.
So I'm curious in terms of the reframing of that, what's been the response from male survivors that you guys are working with, right? Like when they hear that, because and if they've been accessing therapy, if they've been accessing support groups, or reading, because a lot of male survivors will come to this issue. Marcus talked about our male survivor that spoke earlier this morning, talked about how he came to the issue. He reads everything, right? He reads everything, wants to learn everything about this issue. Yeah. And so the language of PTSD is so is everywhere. Yeah, it's so prevalent. What's been the reaction from male survivors?
It's funny you would ask that because, we just had the weekend up at Alta. I wasn't on the team. I was actually out of town, but my house is really handy whenever we have weekends up at Alta. And so before and after we end up here. And when I got home last night, 3 of the team were here from this last weekend. And they talked about that very thing, about how you can just see in survivors' eyes when you make that shift, what a relief, what that takes off of their shoulders to not be seen as a disorder. So yeah, I've seen that many times with our survivors. There's relief in that for them.
In here, I've seen that in the weekends. I've seen it in my day-to-day work, at my day job, in my small practice. Same thing. It's like, and for me, I guess as someone who is trained as a clinical social worker, I'm also a social worker that is about advocacy and questioning things that I'm doing. So I'm always like, oh, we've been doing this way and it hasn't been working. Why not try it this way? Why not? I've been social. I always say our space, our advocates, mental health folks, anyone that's doing the work, we've been trained to well, I'm using sports analogy, to hit to bat righty. And honestly, like, it's worked sometimes and we can report on it but we've missed a lot. Why not try to bat left-handed? Why not learn how to do this thing and kind of, in short, being like, go against the instinct of this, but really kind of tap into that humanity of someone.
I love that. I appreciate both of you for just elaborating on that. I mean, for most folks, I mean, language, we've been talking all day about how language matters so much to male survivors, right? Like, in terms of these preconceived notions that they have about themselves, right? That they've internalized about themselves and about their victimization, but how we approach as clinicians, as social workers, as counselors, as advocates, as law enforcement officers, et cetera, right? Like the folks in the room, how we approach male survivors, the kind of language we use matters, right? And I really appreciate that. So thank you for elaborating on that a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you for that support. I'm sure that's an approach you use in your work too, as well, Emiliano. So, yeah.
So we talked a little about PTSD and PTSI. Dan, did you talk a little about the support groups, or should we?
Yeah, like I said, we started these a couple of years ago in a bit of a response to the pandemic, and have been offering them There was a study in Yale that many of our survivors, our alumni, were part of this study to train male survivors to be peer group leaders, so that rather than always having therapists train, they learned how to facilitate groups, and they got really, really good results from it. And so the men that were part of MenHealing who did that training then became our first peer leaders. Like, our facilitator team is not out there doing the groups. We supervise them. We do regular meetings with the peer leaders about how their groups are going. But that's what we're doing as part of MenHealing, is peer-led support groups. They usually last 16 sessions, but they're every other week. And so it's a pretty long length of time. And then we take breaks if they want to come and continue. Some of the groups have continued on their own. And yeah, it's just been very well received. And so that's why we will be trying these groups. Somebody asked when in January the community groups for people who haven't been to one of our weekends will start in January, and I don't have an exact date yet. Those will be shorter groups, and they'll be much more psychoeducational. The advantage of having survivors from our weekends together doing groups is they have this common language and common experience in there. We don't know how it will go with people, it's from the public. And so we're excited to see, and we're going to try to give them much of the foundation that men get in our weekends, so that eventually we can mix up the groups more than we have been. And Sharon, who spoke earlier, is taking the lead with the partner groups, and those are going to start. Our next round of groups starts in November. We have a training for new peer leaders at the end of October. At the end of September. It actually starts tomorrow. It's tomorrow and next Saturday. So we'll have a bigger group of peer leaders, and some of them are specifically partners who want to facilitate the partner groups, and Sharon's going to supervise that segment of the support groups. So I can imagine us expanding a lot over time into specific topic groups. There's really no end to what we can do if this continues to be as successful as it is. Again, we interview them just like we do for the weekends. It's a little bit different interview, but much the same. We try to ascertain that they're going to be, good, appropriate group members. And like I said, these groups will be 8 weeks instead of 16 weeks.
And the evolution of the support groups will always be informed by, so much of it is always informed by our alum, our community of folks. So that, once again, we want to drive home the point that we are not the experts. We are collaborators, co-conspirators with folks. So we start these support groups, and if there's another interest for a different type, an additional support group, we'll work in collaboration and use what skills we have and what abilities the folks that are suggesting it to create something that is impactful for folks. I feel like if you have skin in the game and belief in it, what we're creating, it'll last and it'll sustain, and it'll be really healing. So much about really about collaboration.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, the joke is when I show up, I have a question or a comment.
Go for it.
So this is very exciting news, right? One of the things that we are constantly hearing, and I talked about this earlier in terms of TASA's guidance document on male survivors. There's actually a section around support, like developing, enhancing support groups for male survivors, for primarily rape crisis centers, advocates, victim service providers. Right. But I'm sure, because I'm super excited about this, and I'm sure there are folks who are curious to know whether these kinds of resources, the kind of curriculum that you talked about, because people are like, what curriculum do I use? How do I create it? Like, where do I start? How do I train the folks? Yeah. Is this something that MenHealing is going to roll out to sort of general advocates and the sort of broader, I hear that you guys are going to continue to collaborate with the folks at BARC, but I think ultimately, are there going to be opportunities to roll this out to folks at other rape crisis centers who are looking to create support group like peer-led support groups, or need to create, need a curriculum for their male survivors. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And of course, we're just kind of getting going, but definitely, especially if we feel like there's a demand for that, if people are asking and wanting that, I could totally see that being a service that we're developing over time for sure. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We just want to share whatever it is that we know, and we want to learn whatever it is that you know. It's very collaborative. So.
And Diana, don't forget, we're actually going to Ohio, Diana and I.
We are.
3 weeks to train the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. They're
like your organization, only Ohio.
Shout out! I think there may be folks still here. They were here earlier from Ohio, from the Ohio Coalition. They're doing amazing work. They have my counterpart there, who is doing very similar work.
Is that
Javon?
Yeah, Javon.
Yeah, that's who we've been working with.
So
Awesome.
it makes perfect sense, right? So if folks are looking for the other me, Javon is my brother from another mother and is doing amazing work in Ohio. He's around this particular issue, so that is so exciting. He hadn't mentioned that to me, so I'm gonna have to reach out to him and see if I could sneak in or attend. But I that's exactly the kind of collaboration that we want to facilitate in the space. People to really think about what is that partnership with MenHealing and other organizations like MenHealing. What do those potential collaborations look like, right? To be able to support their clients, their male survivors in their community. So that's very exciting. I can't wait to hear more about that. So yeah.
Cool.
We're doing a 2-day training for them on running support groups.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah. To tell Javon I'm sending my love. I don't know if he's here or he's going to see this, but let him know I said hi.
Will do.
Cool.
Definitely.
That's awesome.
And so so we do get asked from some orgs and agencies for TA support. We've gone to different orgs and worked with them in collaboration outside of BARC. We've worked with a couple other places. We're going to do this training in Ohio for that coalition. And yeah, we're an org that is pretty nimble and flexible. If it's an interesting idea and aligns with our values, and we can be supportive, we're usually, if we have the capacity and bandwidth, we'll do it. We'll be supportive. Yeah.
We love this stuff. We want to share and be shared with. So.
Well, we are thrilled. I also just want to do a time check because we're like, you have about 14 minutes. So wanted to check with you to see if you had anything else, or if there are questions from the audience. I know you've done both of you have done such amazing job of responding to folks in the comments, and so thank you for doing that. But yeah, go for it, Kenton.
One, maybe two more things I want to just kind of plug about MenHealing. So we do a lot of events. Check our website. We have our Beyond Survival, our Voices of Healing series of videos of alum who've been through our programming and talk about their healing journey. I wanted to show you a video, Michael Gwynn's video, who was an alum of ours and who popped on here. What's going on, Michael? But because of the tech stuff, I don't want to share it. So please check out the website. There's tons of videos for that. We're actually working on this project called the Home Project, and I forgot what the acronym is, but it is, in short, we are working with prisons to put in materials like on tablets for survivors that are behind the wall. So I believe in the state of Ohio, we have about 75,000 tablets that have some of our materials on, like some somatic work, some somatic exercises, and other materials that are relevant and useful for folks that are behind the wall. So once again, another effort on our end to try to expand our reach and our connection with reaching more survivors. It's called HOME, HOME. It's actually on, once again, If you check the website, I will say this, it is the most robust website for a small grassroots.
Most beautiful and most beautiful. It's graphically beautiful. It's so warm and welcoming. Kenton, thank you for saying that, because there are a lot of folks in the room who are working with male survivors who are incarcerated, who are detained, and I think, who are PREA advocates. So to be able to have that kind of resource, and again, if you want to learn more about that and partner with MenHealing about providing that kind of resource, they've developed just an amazing resource, and they are looking for states to partner with in terms of their folks who are detained, incarcerated, juvenile detention centers, jails, prisons. So MenHealing is really those models, and there's opportunities to collaborate. Of course, I always got to pump up MenHealing and the work that you guys are doing, and that's why you are here, because I really want the folks who are in this room to connect with you and the work that you're doing, but especially male survivors, right? Like, I think that this all comes back to what's their needs, how do we ensure that they're getting the support, the healing that they need. And I think you guys are doing phenomenal work in that area, and really appreciate you. And I couldn't think of a better reason for everybody in the room to go and support, to follow. I appreciate you, Kenton, also shouting out Michael, who was part of your, here at TASA, we did 3 years ago, actually this week, we did the Texas Men's Story Project, which you guys focused your story specifically with male identified survivors, right? With this really diverse group of male survivors, including Michael Gwynn, who was part of that project.